I, 36 male, am an engineer. My job is to analyze complex systems, identify points of failure, and implement efficient solutions. For the past year, my relationship with my girlfriend of 5 years, Clara, 32, has been the most complex, failing system I've ever encountered. It started about 8 months ago when she began seeing a therapist, a Dr. Albright. I was supportive, genuinely. I thought it would be good for her, for us. But therapy quickly became a weapon. Every Tuesday night, after her session, I'd be presented with a new, professionally packaged list of my failings. I was emotionally unavailable. I was conflict avoidant. I used logic to create distance. My quiet nature wasn't calm. It was a form of control. Each week, I was the problem. I tried to engage, to understand. I suggested couples counseling. She refused, saying Dr. Albright felt she needed to work on herself first, to find her own truth before we could work on us. It became clear that her truth was a meticulously constructed narrative in which she was the perpetual victim of my emotional shortcomings. The system was failing, and I was the only component being blamed. The breaking point came last Tuesday. She walked in from her session with a look I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger or sadness. It was smug, serene validation. She set her purse down, turned to me with the calm of a zealot, and delivered the final diagnosis. I had a major breakthrough today, she said, her voice even. Dr. Albright and I were talking about the root of my anxiety, and it all came back to the dynamic in this apartment. He agrees with me. The core issue, the common denominator in all our conflicts, is your emotional unavailability and your defensive logic. He confirmed it. She took a breath and looked me right in the eye. All our problems are your fault. I waited for the rest, for the tears, the ultimatum, the demand that I change, that I try harder. But there was nothing, just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the weight of her absolute certainty. And in that silence, something inside me shifted. The constant, grinding exhaustion of trying to fix a system that was designed to blame me just evaporated. It was replaced by a strange, quiet clarity. She wasn't asking for a solution anymore. She was delivering a verdict. I nodded slowly. Okay. She blinked, thrown off. Okay. That's all you have to say. No, I said, and my voice was calmer than it had been in months. You're right. You've spent 8 months with a professional, analyzing the system, and you've identified the single point of failure. Me. Thank you. I stood up. Finally, a solution. Her smugness faltered, replaced by confusion. What solution? The solution is for you to finally get it, to work on yourself. I am, I said, walking toward my home office. I'm implementing the most effective solution based on your data. She followed me, her voice rising. What are you talking about? What are you doing? I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I'm calling a moving company. She stared, utterly baffled. She thought she had me in a checkmate. She didn't realize that by declaring me the sole problem, she had given me the one thing I hadn't had in years, a clear, logical way out. I wasn't a partner in a struggling relationship anymore. I was simply a faulty component that needed to be removed. Update 1. The past 4 days have been a masterclass in watching someone realize that words have consequences. The moving company I called was an emergency service. More expensive, but speed was critical. I booked them for the next morning at 9 a.m. to move my belongings into a storage unit in a pre-furnished short-term rental I found online. The apartment lease is solely in my name. Clara was a listed occupant, but not financially or legally responsible. This was a crucial detail. Clara slept in the guest room that night after a confusing, circular argument where she kept insisting I was missing the point. I slept soundly for the first time in a long time. At 9:02 a.m., the doorbell rang. 2 guys with a dolly were standing there. Clara came out of the guest room, hair a mess, wearing one of my old T-shirts. Her eyes went from the movers to me to the empty boxes I had pulled out of the closet. Leo, what is this? Are you insane? I'm not insane, I said, my voice level. I'm being logical. You and your therapist identified the problem. I'm removing the problem. It's the most efficient path to a resolution for you. The point isn't for you to leave, she shrieked, as the movers began expertly wrapping my computer monitors. The point is for you to change, to fix yourself. You presented a diagnosis, Clara, not a treatment plan. I replied, taping up a box of books. You said I was the problem. I believe you. So, I'm solving the problem. You're free now. You should be happy. That's when the predictable cycle began. First came the rage. She screamed at me, at the movers. She called me a coward, a psychopath. The movers, to their credit, were utterly unfazed, continuing their work with stoic professionalism. Then came the tears. Big, dramatic sobs. After everything we've been through, you're just throwing it all away? I love you. I don't think you do, I said, pausing to look at her. I think you love the idea of having someone to fix, and I'm tired of being your project. Before I left, I made 2 final moves. I placed a cashier's check for $3,000 on the now-empty kitchen counter. The lease is in my name, and it's up at the end of next month. That's 60 days. I'll continue to pay the rent and utilities until then. This check is to help you with your moving expenses and a deposit on a new place. After that, you are on your own. Then, I went to the large terrarium we'd built together 2 years ago. It was a complex, beautiful ecosystem of mosses, ferns, and little sculpted figures. It had been our thing. Lately, some of the ferns had started to yellow from neglect. I carefully, gently lifted the entire glass case. It was heavy. What are you doing with that? Clara whispered, her face pale. I'm the problem, remember? I said. I probably overwatered it. I carried it out to the truck myself. As I left the apartment for the last time, with Clara just standing in the middle of the living room looking lost, I felt a pang of something. Not regret, just sadness for the man who had tried for so long to balance that broken ecosystem. The real escalation began that evening. A barrage of texts and calls. Then, the enablers were activated. Her sister, Gia, called me from a number I didn't recognize. Leo, you are a heartless monster, she began. No preamble. Clara called me. She's destroyed. You abandoned her because you were too much of a coward to handle the truth of her therapy. Gia, I said, my voice tired. Clara presented me with a professional diagnosis that I was the source of all her problems. I acted on that diagnosis. I removed myself. That isn't abandonment, it's problem solving. You're twisting her words. This is emotional abuse. You're punishing her for getting help. Is it? Or am I finally agreeing with her? For the first time in a year, I am not arguing with her narrative. I'm accepting it completely. She just doesn't like the consequences of being right. I hung up. I'm now in a sterile, anonymous corporate apartment. It's quiet. The terrarium is on the new coffee table. It looks a little battered from a move, but the system is stable. And for the first time in a very long time, no one is telling me it's my fault. Update 2. The entitlement has escalated in ways that are almost impressive. Clara and her family seem to operate under the assumption that my resources, time, and emotional energy are utilities that they are entitled to, regardless of how they treat the provider. The past 2 weeks have been about me methodically shutting off the service. First, the primary line of attack failed. The emotional appeals, the angry calls from Gia, the tearful voicemails from her mother, they all hit a wall of my calm, unchanging logic. My mantra, I am respecting Clara's diagnosis and have removed the problem, is apparently infuriatingly difficult to argue with. So, they pivoted to a new strategy, trying to force my hand through professional channels. This is where it got truly interesting. It happened last Tuesday, the day of Clara's regular therapy appointment. My phone rang around 4:30 p.m. An unknown number. I answered with a neutral, hello. Am I speaking with Leo? The voice was male, professional, cautious. You are. Who is this? This is Dr. Albright. My client, Clara, is here in my office with me. She's in a great deal of distress, and she has given me her express permission to contact you. She feels there has been a significant misunderstanding regarding your recent separation. I could hear faint, hitched breathing in the background. She was right there, listening on speakerphone. This was her ace in the hole, using the very authority she'd cited to destroy our relationship to now try and rebuild it on her terms. She thought she could ambush me, put me on the spot with her therapist as a mediator, and I would crumble. "Dr. Albright," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "I appreciate the call, but I'm not sure what there is to misunderstand." "Well," he started, clearing his throat, "Clara is conveying that she feels you interpreted her therapeutic insights as a personal attack and left abruptly, and she's hoping we can open a dialogue, too." I cut him off, politely but firmly. "Sir, let me be very clear. There was no interpretation. There was a statement of fact presented to me as a professional conclusion. On the evening of date, Clara informed me that you, her doctor, had confirmed that all of the problems in our relationship were my fault. I assume you stand by your professional diagnoses." There was a dead silence on the line. I could almost hear the man's brain working, frantically trying to recall what curated version of events Clara had fed him. "Well, the therapeutic process is nuanced," he began to stammer. "I'm sure it is," I continued, "but the information I received was not. It was a verdict, and I chose not to appeal. I accepted the verdict. The only logical, responsible action to take when one is identified as the sole source of problems is to remove that source. My actions were a direct and rational consequence of the diagnosis Clara attributed to you. I fail to see what needs mediation. I have solved the problem." In the background, the hitched breathing turned into a full-blown wail. "That's not what I meant, Leo. I just wanted you to understand." "Then perhaps you misinformed your doctor about the situation, Clara," I said, my voice turning colder. "Or perhaps you misinformed me about his diagnosis. Either way, that's a professional issue for the two of you to resolve. My decision was based on the information you provided, which you presented as a medical certainty. The process of my departure is now irreversible." Dr. Albright found his voice, sounding flustered and deeply uncomfortable. "Leo, my client is clearly distraught, perhaps. Perhaps she should have considered the consequences of using your name and your profession as a weapon to win an argument." I finished for him. "You have a good day, doctor." And I hung up. The satisfaction was immense. Not because I had won, but because I had used pure, unassailable logic to dismantle her entire manipulative framework in front of the authority figure she tried to use against me. Her desperation, however, has now curdled into something uglier. Yesterday, I received an email from my building's management office. An anonymous complaint had been filed against me. It alleged that I had forcibly and illegally evicted a long-term tenant, Clara, and that my erratic and aggressive behavior was a cause for concern among the neighbors. She's no longer trying to get me back. She's trying to burn me down. She's trying to create a problem for me in my own life, now that she can no longer blame me for the problems in hers. It's a pathetic, transparent tactic, and it will be dealt with just as methodically as everything else. Final update. It's been just over 3 months since I removed myself from the equation. The quiet in my life is something I'm still getting used to. It's not an empty quiet. It's a peaceful one. The war is over, not because I won, but because I refused to keep fighting on our battlefield. The dirty trick with the landlord fizzled out exactly as you'd expect a lie to. I scheduled a brief, in-person meeting with the building manager. I didn't get emotional or sling mud. I simply presented the facts. I laid out a copy of the lease agreement with only my name on it. I provided bank statements showing I had paid the full rent for the 60-day transition period, as promised. I provided a signed declaration stating my former partner, Clara, who resided in the unit as an occupant but was not on the lease, and I have ended our relationship. I provided her with 60 days of paid rent and additional funds to secure new housing to ensure a smooth and amicable transition. The complaint filed against me is retaliatory and factually incorrect. Faced with documentation versus a vague, anonymous email, the management sided with the responsible tenant who pays his rent on time. They sent me a follow-up email confirming the complaint was dismissed and apologized for the inconvenience. That was the last I heard of it. The consequences for Clara, from what I've gathered through the grapevine, have been a cascade of harsh realities. Without my income subsidizing her life, she couldn't afford a place on her own anywhere in the city. Her pleas for her parents to co-sign on a lease were apparently met with resistance. likely after they were tired of the constant drama. She ended up moving into her sister Gia's tiny one-bedroom apartment. I can only imagine how well that's going. Two people who feed off each other's victimhood, trapped in the same small space. Her financial situation is dire. The $3,000 I gave her was, I'm told, spent in less than a month on non-essential things, a desperate attempt to maintain a lifestyle she could no longer afford. She was so certain I would crawl back, begging, that she never actually made a practical plan for her own survival. I received one final communication from her about a month ago. It was a long, rambling email sent at 2 a.m. It was a masterwork of revisionist history. In it, she claimed she had only said those things from therapy because she was desperate for me to see her pain. She said I had abandoned her at her most vulnerable and that a real man would have fought for us instead of taking the coward's way out. It was a final, pathetic attempt to reframe my logical decision as an emotional failure. She still, after everything, could not take 1 ounce of responsibility. She ended it by saying she knew we could work it out if I would just admit my part in it all and come home. I never replied. I just created a folder in my email titled The Problem, moved her message into it, and archived it forever. My new apartment is smaller, but it's all mine. The terrarium sits in the center of my living room, in a spot that gets perfect morning sun. When I first brought it here, I had to do some serious work on it. I pruned away the yellowed, dying ferns. I aerated the soil. I cleaned the glass until it sparkled. I removed a few of the little decorative figures that fell out of place. Now, with careful attention and the right balance, it's thriving. New, vibrant green shoots are pushing up through the moss. It's healthier and more beautiful than it's been in years. It turned out the problem wasn't that I was overwatering it. The whole ecosystem was just slowly being poisoned.